Good afternoon. Welcome to the Capital Fund Green Physical Needs Assessment webcast training. My name is Bill Thorson, and I'll be your host for today. To my left is Bruce Ryder, the HUD Office of Capital Improvement Program Manager for the Physical Needs Assessment implementation. Bruce is going to give us a few words of introduction in terms of the P&A that's about ready to roll out. Bruce?
Thank you, Bill. Good day, and thank you for tuning in. I wanted to take this opportunity to briefly let you know, as we speak here in January of 2014, where we are in terms of the timetable for implementing the P&A and those requirements that will, in future, require submission of P&A data and compliance with new energy audit standards. HUD has been responsive to housing authority and industry concerns about moving forward with this initiative during the fiscal uncertainty of the last 2 years. With the passage of a 2-year budget through fiscal year 15 and an appropriation bill for fiscal 14 being finalized as we speak, the uncertainty going forward has been somewhat reduced. We are committed to providing a minimum of 6 months advance notice to housing authorities from the date of publication of a final rule until the earliest submissions. At this point in time, in, again, January of 2014, the earliest possible that any submission under any final P&A rule could become due would be December of this year. And that will continuously change until we have a final actual publication date for a final rule. So I wanted to be sure to let our housing authority partners know that we intend to provide plenty of advance notice. As soon as we have a final rule date, then we'll know some more actual dates to give you. But for your planning purposes, nothing could possibly be due, just the physics of the situation, until December of this year. So we remain in that moving target stage of implementation, and that presents some flexibilities and opportunities to you in terms of planning for your performance of this work. More than 500 housing authorities have already requested their unique PIC data files that are needed to begin work in the GPNA tool. And in fact, several dozen housing authorities have already completed P&As and submitted data reports generated from them to HUD. We continue to encourage all housing authorities to remain engaged in this initiative, to be mindful of the proposed rules when you find a need to proceed with a P&A and or an energy audit in advance of a final rule. There's no requirement for you to comply with these proposed rules, but we want you to have the information you need to reduce any potential for duplication, future duplication of effort, and for you to take maximum advantage of this delay so that you can plan this work around your own best timing. So with that, thank you very much for your time, and we're back to Bill.
Thank you, Bruce. We appreciate your comments. The agenda that we have for today is going to encompass an overview, which will be about 20 minutes. It'll cover the programmatic side of it. We're going to get into the energy audit and the sustainability section, and that will be the bulk of our conversation today. We'll also talk about issues involving the marketability of public housing and the improvements that you can be made relative to that and the GPNA, and then we'll finish up with a quick closing. So having said that, as Bruce mentioned in his introductory comments, that we've done about 5 or 6 of these training sessions already. Some of the earlier training sessions focused on the gutsy regulatory programmatic stuff, and there was just kind of a little bit of the software and the technical stuff. And the more we've done, and it's more acute with this training session, we're going to be focusing less on the programmatic end and more on the actual physical needs assessment, the energy audit, and the guts of that, so that you'll have a better understanding of the real important parts of the actual physical needs assessment and the energy audit itself. So having said that, let me give you a little bit of a background. When we started out a couple months ago, we had 3 essential rules for the capital fund. We had the development reg at 941, we had the CAP and comp grant reg at 968, and then we had a small capital fund rule at 905. That only encompassed the capital fund formula, the eligible expenses, the obligations and expenditures, and we added the capital fund financing program in there at one point in time. But that's all it had. It didn't have environmental requirements. That was all in 968. In 2009 and 2010, we published a couple of proposed rules. The key here is that the new regulation was going to consolidate all of those other regulations into a single rule and streamline the process so that the development, CAP and comp grant, and the capital fund requirements would all be in one place. CAP and comp grant obviously have gone by the wayside now in favor of the capital fund. Part of what we also did was to publish a proposed rule requiring all housing authorities to complete a physical needs assessment. I have good news. The good news is that the Consolidated Capital Fund rule was published on October 24th, 2013. It became effective on November 25th, 2013. Did you catch that? November 25th, 2013. So it's live right now, so you need to be aware of that. The regulation provided for the requirement for all housing authorities to do a physical needs assessment, which I mentioned before. The regulation also had the requirement for the energy audit that was in 965. We had a proposed rule which would have merged the energy audit requirements into the capital fund so we can have an integrated system so that when you're looking at physical needs, you're also looking at ways to reduce your operating costs as well. The physical needs assessment rule has not been published, as Bruce told you earlier. We're waiting for that. Hopefully that will be shortly. But we will not implement the required use of the Green Physical Needs Assessment software, which I'll talk about in a minute, until that rule is published and we publish an implementation notice. So having said that, we need to think about what's in the requirements of the physical needs assessment so that you can get up to speed on that. So the first thing that you need to be aware of is that all housing authorities, regardless of size, will have to do a physical needs assessment and submit that to HUD. The physical needs assessment is both at the project level and summary level for the entire housing authority. And there's this issue of project level is a theme throughout the public housing program with asset-based management, where you have project-based budgeting, project-based management, and now with the physical needs assessment, you have project-based physical needs assessment, and you also, we'll talk about this later, have project-based energy audits as well. So the physical needs assessment itself will also be for a 20-year period of time. We have a 20-year ACC life for the capital fund, and so we need to know what are the improvements that are going to be needed over that 20-year cycle. And we need to know when, like, for example, the roof is going to need to be replaced, or at least scheduled to be replaced. So that'll give us a sense of what our upcoming costs are going to be. Another provision in the rule is that housing authorities will be required to do a physical needs assessment without regard to the amount of money that Congress appropriates for the capital fund on an annual basis. You as a housing authority need to know what your physical needs are. They're obviously going to be more than what you can afford to fund in any given fiscal year, but you need to be able to prioritize that. You need to know if you're going to have a boiler that needs to be replaced now so you don't end up with an emergency later on paying more that you really can't afford. So you're going to have to do a physical needs assessment without regard to how much Congress appropriates. The cost of the physical needs assessment is going to be an eligible expense under the capital fund. The regulation says, and this is typical, you have to complete the physical needs assessment in the form and manner prescribed by HUD. Well, what's that? That is going to be the new GPNA software. Some people call it the GPNA tool. That's available off of the HUD website that Bruce was talking about a little bit earlier. You'll have to do the physical needs assessment using that software, and it will provide you with an extract so that you can upload the data from that physical needs assessment to HUD. And that's part of the requirements, is that you have to submit that physical needs assessment to HUD. As Bruce was talking about a little bit earlier, the physical needs assessment will not be required until we publish the final rule on the Green Physical Needs Assessment. We have the final rule for the Consolidated Capital Fund. We're waiting for the final rule on the Physical Needs Assessment and the Energy Audit to come out, which is going to merge both of those into the Consolidated Capital Fund. So as Bruce was indicating, it's going to be at least 6 months before the first Physical Needs Assessment is going to be due. Another point is that if you've got a physical needs assessment that you've done during the last 3 years, you will not have to redo it, assuming it meets the requirements of the regs. For example, a 20-year needs assessment, the integration of your energy audit into the physical needs assessment, and there's a component in there that we'll talk about later on this afternoon. HUD Notice PIH 2010-46 provides some additional guidance for you there. So when it comes to, and I know Bruce talked about when the physical needs assessment is going to be due, and part of the issue is publication of the final rule. So when you think about that, and they talk about when the physical needs assessment is going to be due, there are two 120-day rules. The first 120-day rule is sliding because we don't know when the regulation will be published. But the rule is that the physical needs assessment rule the first ones will be due 120 days after the effective date of the final rule for the GPNA. 120 days after the effective date of the final rule for the GPNA. So that's the first one, and that's sliding. The second one is that the physical needs assessment that you submit are due 120 days before the end of your fiscal year. So if you see on our chart here, if you are a March 31st fiscal year end PHA, your PNA will be due to HUD on December 1st. And that will always be once the reg is published. If you're a June 30th housing authority, your housing authority will be required to submit the PNA to HUD by March 2nd. If you're a September 30th housing authority, your PNA will be due on June 2nd. If you are a December 31st housing authority, your PNA will be due to HUD on September 1st. This chart here is the one I want you to remember, because that's, once the rule becomes effective, that's going to dictate the day on which your PNA is due to HUD. We have an example for you here. If you notice on the slide, we're assuming for the sake of argument, and this is just hypothetical because we do not know when the reg will be published, but for the sake of argument, let's assume it gets published by April 30th, 2014. Rules become effective 30 days afterwards. So let's assume for the sake of argument that the rule will be effective on May 31st, 2014. So if you advance forward 120 days, the question then is, which PHAs will be due for the PNA? And what you have to do is go back to that chart, and you'll see that at that juncture, the March 31st housing authorities will be due on December 1st. So you get a sense of the time frame that there is going to be able to implement this rule, given the fact that we've got a sliding date for when it's actually published. We will give you more information. I don't want you to worry too much about that particular aspect of it right now, understanding that the rule is coming out. So we'll have an implementation notice that will be published after the final rule is published. It'll give you all sorts of information. These dates will be fixed for you, so everybody will have plenty of time, plenty of notice in terms of when this is coming out. Housing authorities must use the HUD software known as the GPNA tool. That's a given. The energy audit has to be done in conjunction with your GPNA has to be done in conjunction with your energy audit, so that when you do your energy audit, you incorporate your energy conservation measures into your green physical needs assessment. And my colleagues will talk about that a little bit later on in the broadcast. Energy audits are done within the last 3 years won't have to be redone if they meet all of the requirements of the energy audit rule. After the physical needs assessment is done, the housing authorities will send an extract to HUD. Remember I said you have to submit your GPNA to HUD? Well, it's not going to be the entire thing. The software generates what they call an XML file that will be submitted by you to HUD, and we'll give you the information on that a little bit later. Having said that, after the GPNA is done, you make your submission to HUD based on the schedule that we just talked about. You'll be required on an annual basis to submit an update to HUD. The update is only going to be that modernization work that you've done on your existing public housing during the last fiscal year. So it shouldn't be overly burdensome or overly labor intensive to do this annual update. But I just want to make sure you're aware that once you do the physical needs assessment, which is due every 5 years, that you still have to do an annual update. Not a big deal. Another point to take across is the fact that the GPNA, the physical needs assessment, is not a commitment document. What do I mean by that? Well, when you get your capital funds, you have an annual statement and a 5-year action plan. When you finish your modernization work and all the modernization work is finished, you have to do a final performance and evaluation report and a actual modernization cost certificate. Those both have to be signed and those both have to be submitted. Those are financial statements of the housing authorities. Those are commitment documents, the types of things. The GPNA is a data tool. We want to have it submitted to HUD so HUD can take a look at it, help HUD as a part of its monitoring process. But it's your tool primarily to help you with your strategic planning, to help you prioritize your needs, decide how you want to spend your capital funds, and how you fill out your capital fund 5-year action plan and your annual statement. So this is really a tool from you to use. Bruce talked about the PIC building and unit data characteristics. We are going to use a data download of PIC building and unit data characteristics that will go into the GPNA. You will get that PIC download from EPIC. Now, some housing authorities are able to use EPIC right now. If there are issues, then you can go to PHA PNA at HUD.gov to get the PIC building and unit data characteristics if your data isn't in EPIC. But eventually we're going to have all of the data, PIC building and unit data characteristics, available to you off of EPIC. Now, we've also been harping for many years about the importance of the data quality in PIC. HUD requires you on an annual basis to go in and validate your building and unit data characteristics. This is very important because when you do your download of your PIC data and you start to do your P&A work and you upload that P&A work back up to HUD once you're finished, it's got to match exactly. So having accurate P&A data is critical. So you want to, this is one of the preparatory type things that you want to take a look at as you're getting ready for doing your physical needs assessment, which is my PIC building and unit data characteristics permit? Are my PIC building and unit data characteristics correct? There. So it's important to make sure that that's done. The next thing we want to talk about is the fact that the software requires input of cost data. Now, there's 2 ways you can do this. You can go out and purchase commercial cost data, means Marshall, Swift, Beck's. HUD doesn't have a preference. It's your choice. You can use whatever you want, but you need to have cost data. Some housing authorities have their own cost data, which is based on their contracts that they've done over the last couple of years. If you want to use that as being the most accurate for you, not a problem. Go ahead and use that. it will probably provide you with better, more accurate data in order for you to see what your backlog and your accrual costs are over time. So it will only benefit you if you have that data. If you don't, not a problem, but it's important that you need to purchase one of the commercial cost indices. If you don't do it, you should have your architect or engineer do it. Or if you hire out the GPNA to be done by somebody else, they'll have to do it as well. So it's just something you need to think about. It is, and I mentioned this before, a time-consuming issue. It's gonna take time to load all of that information in there, and that's why we encourage you to get started earlier rather than later on this process. The cost library, as I was just indicating, can be very staff-intensive at first because of all the types of data that you have to input. Make sure that you get all that stuff in there. As you get into the subsequent years, it's not going to be as staff-intensive because you're going to be able to carry over all of that work. The GPNA will require detailed data by project. Couple of types. Number one, you're going to have to take architectural takeoffs on your building components. For example, you have Bill Thorson Homes. Bill Thorson Homes has a roof, right? Well, in order to be able to figure out how much we're going to need to replace in terms of roof shingles, we need to know the gross area of the roof. So you're going to need square footage of roof areas, for example, or you have sidewalks through your property. We're going to need to know all of the linear footages relative to sidewalks in the paved areas. So as you go in and you find things like paved areas that need to be replaced or repaired, you'll have that data already in there. And again, this requires a little bit of time up front. Another thing that you have to consider is the effective useful life of the individual building component. Remember, we're doing a physical needs assessment for a 20-year period. And so we need to know what the effective useful life of a building component is. Like, for example, the roof on Bill Thorson Homes. You put that in, that the manufacturer tells me it's got a 20-year life. So you enter into the system a 20-year life for your roof on Bill Thorson Homes. However, that roof may last a little bit longer. Not everything wears at the same rate. So we have another provision in there for the remaining useful life. So as you go through, particularly your initial run through of the project, you'll have to be taking a look at the individual building components and deciding whether or not the remaining useful life is longer or shorter than what the original projected useful life is. That's another activity that you need to think about as you go through there and build your cost library. The next question that comes up quite frequently is, who should be doing the green physical needs assessment? And the answer is that it's up to you. If you want your staff to do it, if the staff have the competence to do it and the experience and the qualifications, not a problem. If you want the contractors to do it, you make sure that the contractors have the requisite experience and qualifications, not a problem. On the GPNA, there are no certification requirements. For those of you who are familiar with the Real Estate Assessment Center, the REAC UPCS inspections, if you're going to be an inspector for the contractor, you have to be certified by HUD in doing the UPCS inspection. In the case of the physical needs assessment, there are no certification requirements. The Housing Authority must make the results of the P&A available to the residents and the Resident Advisory Board once the P&A is completed and it's been uploaded to HUD. So you need to build that into your process. So that's the general gist of the GPNA. Let's talk a little bit quickly about the energy audit. The new energy audit requirements are a little bit better than what they used to be. In the 965 regs, we had a requirement that you did an energy audit once every 5 years. Didn't really say how you did the energy audit. There was, at one point in time, a reference in the regulation that you had to use there was an old policy development research, PD&R workbook. that went through individual ECMs. No longer. We have an established, consistent, uniform standards, which is the ASHRAE, which is the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers, the ASHRAE Level 2 Energy Audit. So this way we're going to be able to have a standardized, uniform way of performing energy audits and putting this information into the GPNA. There is, unlike the GPNA, there is no software, there is no specific format. Just have your housing authority staff or your contractor do the ASHRAE Level 2 energy audit, and that should give you the information that you need to be able to enter that data into the system. Housing authorities are not required to implement any specific energy conservation measure unless required by statute. Housing authorities are also required to integrate utility management and capital planning to maximize energy conservation, and that's required by the Energy Policy Act of 2005. And we facilitated that by the requirement of the energy audit as well as the requirement of the physical needs assessment, and we have a provision inside the physical needs assessment software to put energy conservation measures into it. The energy audit, if you've done one in the last 3 years, you will not have to redo your energy audit if it meets the standards of the new rule. In addition, you won't have to do an energy audit on any project for which you've gotten HUD approval for demolition or disposition. Lastly, you will not have to have an energy audit for any project that is less than 5 years old. So that's a good thing, I think. We've talked about the timing of the rule several times this afternoon, and so we will be publishing an implementation notice to let you know exactly when the GPNA and the energy audits are going to actually kick in. Relative to the energy audit, and this was true before, and I mentioned this a couple of minutes ago, all housing authorities have to do an energy audit for each project, right? The energy audit will have to be done once every 5 years. I mentioned that as well. And that's been the case as before, and these will continue. The energy audit is going to review project costs, savings, and payback periods for a variety of energy conservation measures. Some might ask the question, well, what's an energy conservation measure? An energy conservation measure is that activity that will reduce utility and energy consumption, and commensurately, it'll reduce your energy cost as well. When you're doing your energy audit, you can also consider green measures, which don't necessarily save energy, and you may also consider issues that involve environmental quality, so that if there are factors that improve the overall health of the project residents, like the air quality, that can also be included in your energy audit. The energy audit requirements are basically broken down into two pieces that you need to know. First one is your core ECMs, core energy conservation measures, and these are energy conservation measures that have a track record of reducing energy conservation or energy costs. Like, for example, the building envelope, insulation is an example of that. New heating and cooling and other mechanical systems. The newer systems usually are saving a lot more energy than the old ones. Water is a quick payback. The toilets nowadays are now 1.6 and 1.2 as opposed to 6 gallons from the old days. Power and lighting systems and controls, like, for example, compact fluorescent lights. You notice this when you go to Home Depot anymore. That's getting to be the point where that's all you can get. Appliances, purchasing Energy Star appliances. The new capital fund consolidated rule that I mentioned a couple of minutes ago specifically requires you to use Energy Star appliances unless it is not cost effective to do so. So you have the core ECMs, and then the next thing you have is advanced ECMs. And advanced ECMs are generally more difficult issues to deal with, like fuel conversion, conversion technologies like energy management systems, or energy generating technologies like renewable energy, solar, geothermal, and one of my favorite is wind powered. I see that as I fly across the country, I see the windmills out there. So those are more advanced energy conservation measures. So when you look at your ECMs, one of the things that we think about is what's the payback for the ECMs. In other words, what's the initial cost and how much am I saving each year? So how long does it take to pay back that initial cost? So the rule breaks it down into 3 segments: 5 years or less, 5 to 10 years, and greater than 10. So this gives you a sense of which ones are going to give you the biggest bang for the buck and pay you back the quicker. So that gives you information for that purpose. So having said that, that covers all of the basic requirements for the energy audit that we wanted to share with you today. We have a lot of information on our website at www.hud.gov. If you go to Public and Indian Housing, you'll see across the top, you're going to see the capital fund. When you click on the capital fund, there will be a drop-down screen that has a variety of things like funding as well as the physical needs assessment. So you click on that and you're going to find there the variety of things, program description. There will be frequently asked questions that are regularly updated. You're going to find the GPNA software, or the GPNA tool as some like to call it. You're going to find the GPNA user's guide, and you're also going to find a link to these webcasts, not only this webcast, but other webcasts on the physical needs assessment and other capital fund activities that are going on there. On the capital fund website, there's a learning tools link that'll bring you to there. So that's going to give you a lot of information to help you get started on this process, get started on the learning process, so you can move forward and you're going to be ready when it comes time for you to submit your GPNA to HUD. And now we'll get into the next 2 components of our training for today. The first one will be sustainability, which relates to the energy audit, and the second will relate to the marketability issues that you can do to help increase the occupancy of your units, both of which were accommodated in the GPNA software. So we're going to bring on 2 of my colleagues, Bill Champion and Matt Mutter.
All right, so Bill introduced Matt and Bill. I'm Matt, and I'm going to talk first a little bit about energy. So the energy audits, what is HUD looking for? So HUD's looking for the energy audit really to meet industry standard. So first, it establishes minimum industry qualifications. Those industry qualifications include BPI training, ResNet, Certified Energy Manager, those kind of qualifications. The goal really is to meet or equal ASHRAE standards, and that's an ASHRAE Level 2. We'll talk a little bit more about the difference between Level 1, 2, and 3. If there's a state standard, then HUD expects that that standard will be met as well. So what is the current submission requirements? Requires utility analysis, and as Bill said earlier, it requires a discussion of core ECMs, 5-year payback, 10-year payback, 20-year payback, but also requires a discussion of advanced ECMs. So let's talk a little bit about Level 1, 2, and 3 energy audits. These are the ASHRAE levels. Level 1 is really like limited math level. It's top level. It's a walkthrough of the site. It lists opportunities. There's really no calculations other than industry standard paybacks associated with each ECM. At a Level 2 energy audit, you start to talk about profiling utility use over the year. From that utility profile, you start to ascertain what part of the utility bill belongs to each system. And we'll show you a little bit what that looks like in a graph later on. Level 2 requires benchmarking, comparing that building against peers in the industry. This being housing, that's who we're going to be comparing against as far as energy usage per unit, energy usage per square foot. And a detailed list of energy savings opportunities. We refer to those opportunities as ECMs. Estimated cost to implement, and a discussion of payback. The difference between a Level 2 and a Level 3 really is similar in our discussion to algebra versus calculus. A level 3 energy audit is also sometimes referred to as an investment grade audit. In that audit, we're really looking at the interactive effects. What happens if we do two projects together? If we do a lighting project and an HVAC project and a building envelope project, each of those is going to deliver different savings together than the sum of each one considered separately. So we require computer modeling at a level 3. So those interactive effects come into play together, and we can actually do a prediction that we can really book on. And this is what, if you're going to be doing an EPC or an energy performance contract, you would want an investment grade audit done. All right, so data required, what's step one? Step one is collecting data. 12 months is the minimum utility bills that we need to gather when we're going to do an energy audit. 24 months is preferable, but with 12 months, we'll be able to do a profile of the building, looking at not only electricity, but gas, water, if there's propane or steam, which some of you all will have depending on where you're located, and put those all into the calculator. And we want to look at mechanical plans and have an understanding about what type of equipment we've got in the building. In order to do the benchmarking, why are we doing it? Because it's really hard to measure, hard to manage if we haven't done any measures. So the benchmarking helps us do a first step in where does this property stand against its peers? Is this a high performer? Is it a low performer? Really, what's the magnitude of the opportunity? So that's what benchmarking allows us to do. The other thing that benchmarking really allows us to do is to take these multiple inputs, gas, electricity, propane, and put them into one common denominator, one common measure, and we call that energy intensity. And you'll see at the bottom of this slide, that's referred to as kBTUs per square foot. That's a much better measure than dollars per square foot, which depending on where you are in the country, could vary widely depending on what you're paying for electricity. If you're in a state that has coal powered electricity, it's very cheap. Other places, much more expensive. So some of you may recognize this slide. This is the HUD residential benchmarking tool. And what I've circled here is a couple of the outputs as we're entering data into the benchmarking tool, a couple of the things that are going to be of use later in the slideshow. These are the outputs that are talking about what that energy intensity is, what the usage per square foot is, what the total annual usage is. This is a look at EPA Portfolio Manager. Many of you have seen Energy Star on your appliances. EPA, along with Department of Energy, using their Energy Star brand, came up with a number of tools for folks like HUD, folks like consultants that are doing energy profiles of buildings. And the Portfolio Manager is one of those tools. They've got thousands of buildings in this tool, and they've profiled them across the country and weather normed the data. So they're all measured with an equal number of heating and cooling degree days. And this has outputs that are going to come into your overall HUD tool. So that's why we're walking you through a couple of these. This is another acceptable benchmarking tool. So HUD is okay with whichever one of those benchmarking tools you use, as long as you're doing the benchmarking. So this is a copy of utility analysis. This is your natural gas profile. And the so what on these couple slides that I'm going to show you is it's obvious the spikes and the curves here. The spikes in your natural gas bill indicate heating season. So we're able to take those, shave off the tops of those peaks, and say, well, the rest of this is likely to be for cooking or hot water, depending on what we know about the building. But this is how we start to move from the very large picture. We've got these stacks of utility bills down to being able to estimate, here's exactly what percentage of the utility bills belong to hot water heater, how much belongs to cooking, and then we can really stack rank where the opportunities are. This is electricity, and likewise, if you're looking at the spikes in electricity there, that's during air conditioning season. So we can easily look at that, and this one actually has a much cleaner profile where you can say, okay, I can predict what the base load in this building is. For electricity, base load is lighting higher than anything else. appliances, what we call plug load, comes after that. But it allows us to really take a look at, here's what savings would be from new HVAC, here's what lighting would likely deliver based on real estimates. So from that benchmarking and the utility bill analysis, then we go into the actual energy audit. In the energy audit, we're doing a review of all the energy consuming components and coming up with ECMs, energy conservation measures, and ranking them based on payback. So what happens after the energy audit is we produce a plan. The plan really is a ranking of what are the opportunities, and then how do we prioritize and put those in a logical order. We want to capture as many of those that have paybacks associated as possible. And the so what of how we're doing it now under the HUD program is we are entering those energy conservation measures into the HUD tool and matching them up with components that are in the HUD tool, so that when we're doing life cycle replacement, we're also looking at what a more energy efficient replacement would be. So we're doing that time and time again for our appliances as well as major components. In addition to that, we're looking at our viable candidates for renewables, solar, wind, geothermal. We call those advanced ECMs. So we've covered this a couple times: core ECMs, insulation, building envelope, low flow water devices. So I think if we haven't said it already, we've talked a lot about energy, but water conservation is very much a part of what we're doing here. So whenever we're talking about the energy audit, it really is a utility audit. Water is very much a part of everything we're looking at. Advanced ECMs, renewables, solar, geothermal, and Bill mentioned wind, so we're going to make sure we mention wind. Regional ECMs. Not going to read every one of these to you. You can look at the slide later on. But in a cold climate, big paybacks are from HVAC and building envelope. Warm climate, it's all about air conditioning, roofing, and again, building envelope. Window tinting, awnings, and shading, what they call some passive solar measures. Site lighting and interior lighting is good everywhere. High paybacks there. Domestic hot water, those are your hot water heaters in the individual apartments, or if it's a central system, that applies everywhere. And then your green solutions, renewable, advanced ECMs. So many of you may be familiar, or maybe you're not, with another HUD program that was called the Mark-to-Market program. In the Market program, there were several hundred properties that were studied afterwards. These were the most frequently occurring items that actually made it into the rehabs that were funded under this program. So as you can guess, water conserving devices, so low flow toilets, low flow faucets, those were the number one most frequently occurring item that did get rehabbed. Appliances next, heating and cooling, domestic hot water heaters. So, as I've said earlier, domestic hot water, there's a big opportunity there. One of the reasons is that multifamily apartments is a big user of hot water. It's a 24/7 operation where you've got hot water going on in an apartment. So lots of use, which means lots of opportunities. Common ECMs, this is also from the study. HVAC, 56% payback from those. Lighting, 17%, and you can see. So real powerful data just from a small sample done in the Mark-to-Market program of several hundred properties, but real results that were trackable. This is more from the Mark-to-Market. CFL was implemented, compact fluorescence. Those are actually now on the way out, and LEDs are on the way in. And you can see the rest. Refrigerators next to are water-saving items in HVAC. So out of, I think this particular sample was a 300 apartment building sample. So let's talk a little bit about advanced ECMs. So this is a cool website. It's in your slides. You can check it out on your own. This is the NREL website, the National Renewable Energy Lab. This allows you to go in, pull up your site, and look at things like the potential for solar power on your site, the potential for wind energy. So it's one of the tools that consultants use when they're looking for these advanced ECMs, or you can do do it yourself if you're doing your own energy audit. This is one of the tools that's available through the NREL. This is the PV watts calculator, which is the solar calculator. This is the wind resource map, where you can look at your site and see if it's in one of the high propensity wind areas, which would mean a next level study for wind would be appropriate for your site. And here's a little bit on wind energy. There's two different types. There's the big turbines that you see, and then there's small vertical axis that actually are appropriate on some smaller buildings, some city mounts, as well as other places. So we've seen a few of those in urban areas, as well as out in more isolated sites. Geothermal. Geothermal is really an up-and-coming technology. It involves putting hot water, actually water loops or solvent loops underground, and taking advantage of the latent heat underneath the top layer of the earth. It can be done vertical, deep well layout, or horizontal layout. And this allows us to look at a couple of different scenarios depending on how the site's located, realizing a lot of these properties don't have a lot of space. So these kind of graphics can help you do a study to preliminarily determine would that be of benefit to you. And so that's all about heating and HVAC. Advantages of geothermal, here they are: up to 44% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and 25% less refrigerant. You can see a couple of the items there. So field methodology. Once the energy audit goes in place, what's going to happen in the field? So first of all, the green PNA team typically includes an architect and an engineer. As we said before, HUD requires BPI certification, lead, or certified energy manager. And during the site access phase, those professionals are going to be out looking at units. It's a 10 to 25% access requirement, 100% access to common areas and mechanical areas. Typically, it's multiple days on site for the team of engineers. During that time, they're going to be collecting utility bills and likely pulling drawings and history of what you all have paid for retrofits in the past. What are they going to be taking with them? So infrared camera, we'll show you a picture of what one of those looks like, but those are becoming more and more common. Data loggers for actually recording how lights are coming on and off, temperatures being adjusted, humidity and temperature sensor, light meter. We're going to be measuring to see if we're overlighted, say in common areas. And you hear folks talking about de-lamping, but if we're going to be doing a lighting retrofit, in many cases we find that common areas are overlit, and not only can we put in more energy efficient devices, but we can take the overall lighting levels down to a more reasonable. So this is a picture of what we see using our infrared camera. This is a thermal image of a condensate return pipe as part of a steam heat system. So what this allows us to look at is a couple things. Is there enough insulation on these pipes? And are the systems operating the way that they should be? So there may be another picture coming up of a building envelope. So standard tools used for the following. I don't need to read through these for you, but we're looking at thermal insulation. When we get into an attic, we're taking a look at how much insulation is there. There's high paybacks from putting additional insulation. So if we're going to calculate the R value of what's there, we need to look at what's there. And then the third bullet talks about the extremely technical Ziploc stopwatch method of checking low flow sinks. Bill, that's one of your favorites. All right, so low flow faucets and shower heads, I just talked about that a bit. Big paybacks associated with those, but pretty low tech. So we can usually tell by looking at the actual fixture itself if it's been retrofit or not, but easy enough to measure if it's low flow or not. And you can do that yourself too. Flow rate is just the measure of gallons per minute. You can look up the standards of what those are and then do your own test using a measured container like a Ziploc bag or a known amount of cups in a measured amount of time. Air duct testing. We hear quite a bit about air duct testing. So what we're looking for in air duct testing is, are there leaks in the air ducts, so you're blowing conditioned air through the ducts that's not making it into the apartments. So this is a tightness test in the number one reason why you're doing it. So you hear this also referred to as blower door testing. So we see that this is very appropriate in single family, scattered site. It's of limited value, but of some value in elevator apartments or townhouses. Modeling is the next thing that comes into play. There are several HUD-approved modeling tools. TREAT, EQUEST, and Energy Pro are the latter two that are approved by EPA. This is a little look at TREAT modeling. I suspect that most of you all who are looking at this presentation are going to have somebody doing this kind of modeling for you. But what we're trying to do is build a model of the building and then predict what different changes into the building envelope, into the HVAC system, are going to deliver to the overall energy usage profile of that building. This is what an EQUEST model looks like. If you can see at the top, we call it energy modeling because we basically recreate a box-type model in the computer of what that building looks like and then run the effects of changing out different building components into the model. And you can see the predicted profile energy usage curves there. Energy Pro is a little bit simpler, and that's one that we often use. Okay, 12-month distribution table. So one of the outputs of these models is once you profile the building and look at your ups and downs based on the time of year, you can start really getting into the fine detail as to which systems use what amount of energy, and that really allows us to calibrate that against what the payback for replacing that system is. So everybody likes a pie chart, very easy to understand where the big paybacks are there. And this is what a ranked table of energy conservation measures looks like. So when you have your energy audit done, before you go to enter this data into the HUD tool, this is what the deliverable is going to look like from your consultant if they're giving you a qualified energy audit. This is going to have what the opportunity is, what the cost of that opportunity is, and what the payback associated is with it. Those are the inputs that you're going to want. If you're getting something less than this, then it's likely you're getting a level 1 audit, which may have some rule of thumb recommendations, but isn't going to end up being enough to populate the HUD tool. So at the end of the energy audit, this is also what the deliverable should look like with respect to a single ECM. This has the inputs, what is the cost of this ECM, what's the existing usage of this particular component costing you, and what's the payback likely to be. This is what you're going to need for each of the ECMs in your level 2 energy audit to feed into the tool when we're setting that ECM up in the HUD GPNA tool. One last component before I turn it over to Bill to walk through the tool is a little discussion of marketability. So we hear a lot about marketability in a number of HUD programs. What are we talking about? So marketability has a couple themes. Really, marketability in a nutshell is if this property were not in the HUD portfolio, would it be able to compete in the open market? So we're looking at things like curb appeal. These properties aren't meant to be luxury apartments, but they're not meant to be substandard of what's available out in the competitive market. Landscaping should be part of it, air conditioning, carpet if it's appropriate. Modern appliances are appropriate, and Energy Star modern appliances are a part of what HUD expects here in these apartments, certainly after we do the GPNA. These buildings have security systems, amenities like common area, playground, and other amenities. So those are the things that we're looking for to make sure that this portfolio, for each portfolio, it's maintained in a market level standard, and there's a place to put these items in the overall GPNA tool. With that, I'll turn it over to Bill.
Thank you, Matt. Good afternoon. My name is Bill. I'd like to walk you through first a few slides and then a GPNA demonstration. As Bill Thorson said earlier, This session is a follow-on to the additional WebExes we've been delivering. So there were some prerequisites, and we're going to start this advanced training, understanding that knowledge of the tool is there, and we're understanding what the energy audit has been delivering. So as Matt stated before, we're looking at what the energy audit has provided. It's actually delivered an ECM table, and in each of these tables and these calculations, you'll see some basic items. There's no standard format for the Level 2 ASHRAE Energy Audit deliverable. However, there are some key units of data that you'll need. You will definitely need the existing energy-using equipment. You'll need to understand what types of energy it's using, whether it's using kilowatts per hour, kilowatt hours, therms, or water, and what the proposed alternative is and how much savings there is in the use of those units. This is an ECM data sheet or a simple audit data sheet for low flush toilets or water closets. You'll see that you can go from 3.5 to 1.6 to 1, and there is an energy savings in gallons per flush and in the actual use of the water. Again, we look into the tool and we assume that everyone on the training knows how to run the actual tool. The addressing of the simple steps of creating building sets and unit sets has all been discussed in other trainings. So we are at the part where we've discussed how to create a projection. You start by running a cross projection, and just to review, you can do that two ways, by running inspection projections or actually building a cost projection line item by line item. Either way, you have to start with PNA items that have already been completed in your actual assessment. So this is the actual cost projection for an AMP in a large authority. And this is where you would start. And adding a sustainability item begins with something as simple as that. You'll be looking in the center panel there at the top, and you will add sustainability. You will pick sustainability as your choice and go to the Add button, and you would click that. Now, when you click the Add the sustainability item, you will be asked a few questions. You should be prepared to select the category to which the item belongs. That would be the site, the building exterior, the building system, the common areas, or the units. You will be expected to find the actual PNA item that's being upgraded, and that'll be in your list of actual PNA items. And you have to be prepared to answer a set of sustainability line item details as well as the sustainability data. So after clicking that button, here's what you will see in the actual tool. On the left-hand side, you'll be asked to enter the line item details. On the right-hand lower panel here, you'll be asked to enter the sustainability data, which drives the actual paybacks. So in the detail steps, and this will be covered in the demo as well, here are the individual items that you'll need to know. The list looks like it may be a little long, but it's not that difficult to enter these items. First, you'll double click on the item from your PNA that you'll be upgrading. You'll give it a line item name and number. The numbers just to identify where in your list that they'll fall. The line item name would be the item, let's, for sake of argument, call it Energy Star refrigerators. You'll enter a description. That's a more detailed description of the component. You'll enter the proper unit of measure. Right now, the tool defaults to lineal feet, but you'll see you could choose square feet, percentages, or even each. You'll enter the cost data source. You have a few options there. Cost data could be gained or found or obtained by bidding or internal sources or an industry standard guidance like RS means. And that'll be asked for in the cost index. So you could use RS means, Marshall and Swift, or any other industry guidance out there. And the cost index reference is actually the reference number used in those industry standards. You'll enter the replacement cost for the new item, the local multiplier. the estimated useful life data source, where that information comes from, the index and the reference, as well as the replacement RUL. How long is this new item expected to last? You can enter the quantity, but remember you've double-clicked on a PNA item, so you can use the defaulted quantity from that PNA item, and you will also enter the amount that you'll be replacing, whether it's all of the items. For example, will you replace all of the fridges, or would you replace just a portion of them, and how long or how soon will you need to replace them? So here's an example. On the left-hand side is the default screen, what comes up, and on the right-hand side, you'll see where that information is entered. Again, we'll be walking through this in the demos, but on the left-hand side, that's what you have to enter. On the right-hand side shows one that's completed. Now you'll also be entering sustainability steps. If you remember on the lower right-hand panel, this is the data required to generate the payback and energy audit savings and projections. So in this one, in this set of questions, you'll enter the sustainability category, which could be Energy Star units or low flow or just the type of energy savings items you're going to use. You'll enter the utility rate, again, data that you'll need to know before you start this. Here in Maryland, we use about 12.5 cents per kilowatt hour, $1.55 a therm. These are things that you'd need to know. We use about 4.5 kilogallons of water, 4.5 cents per kilogallon. So you'll calculate the payback period by entering that data, and you will use the project cost over 20 years button to actually create what the projection looks like over 20 years. If you're satisfied with that projection, you insert, and that will put this item into your cost projection. So again, on the left-hand side is what the data will be asking. The data on the left-hand side is what the GPNA tool will be asking for. On the right-hand side is one that's completely filled out, and you can see it's filled out because you do see the actual payback on the right-hand side. And then again at the bottom, you will be looking at the projection. You'll press the button at the top, project cost over 20 years, and that will actually fill in what years you will be using or basically implementing these savings. Here, you could see it happening twice over the 20-year term, and the difference between those 2 years is 15, which is what we've entered as the estimated useful life. And then you insert that projection into the table by pressing the button, and you will see highlighted in green, there's the sustainability item. All right. As Matt touched on briefly, there are also marketability items that can be added to the GPNA tool. Again, these all start with running the cross projections. This part, up to this part, should be nothing new, having seen the other WebEx trainings. Adding a marketability or even an accessibility item really follows the same process. I've added accessibility because it's the same questions that need to be asked for whether it's a marketability or an accessibility item. There are two ways to generate a marketability or an accessibility item. You can add a new line item, and that's done by selecting a new item from the drop-down and entering the appropriate data. A much simpler process, a much more simpler process than the sustainability item. It only asks for the item, what it is, the general data, and then the projection over 20 years. Likewise, the second method of adding a marketability item is to add a projection to an existing line item. So if you've already got marketability items in your projection, you can click on an existing item, bring that same item up, and then modify or edit the data that you'd like to insert into the projection. So that's done by adding a projection to an existing line item, choosing the item, entering the data, and then projecting the cost over the next 20 years. Once that's done, it's the same process. You insert the actual item into the projection, and you can see on the upper left panel, the marketability item shows in blue, and the accessibility item, same process as the marketability item, but that one shows in yellow. With that, I'd like to open up a GPNA tool and actually walk through a couple of these. I'd like to start the GPNA demo portion by first opening my tool. And the tool here will give me two options, continue to dashboard and continue to control panel. As stated before, my tool is filled. I've got my cost projections done. I've got my amps, my building sets, unit sets, and common area sets complete. And I've also got a fully completed and filled out cost library. So what I'd like to do first is choose an amp and go to my cost projection. I'm in my first amp here. And my cost projection contains all the items that I've observed in my physical needs assessment. All right, the first step in creating the sustainability item is adding the sustainability line item. And I will do this by going add line item, choose my choice here, sustainability, and clicking add. I'm going to add a component in the units, and that is Energy Star refrigerators. The first thing I need to do here is double click on the item that I'd like to upgrade. And that would be refrigerators. Double click refrigerators. Okay. All right. And I can see that that's actually been verified because it's filled out the refrigerator information on the right. So my line item ID I'm going to choose is 4641. My line item name would be Energy Star refrigerators. The description is going to be a little bit more detail about my refrigerator. 16 cubic foot refrigerator and freezer. And that's frost-free. Okay. My unit of measure has defaulted to lineal feet. I'm actually going to choose each for refrigerators. I had three choices of index, housing authority estimate for bids. I'm actually using an index to come up with my refrigerator data. I'm using RS means, and my RS means number for refrigerator is 113.113.238.500. My replacement costs for the refrigerators are $900 each. In Maryland, it costs a little bit more than average to purchase material and get labor to install that material. So my local multiplier is above 1, it's 1.05. My estimated useful life data source, again, is an index. It is RS means, and it actually has the same EUL index reference number as cost index number. My replacement EUL, my estimated useful life for my new Energy Star refrigerators are 15 years. The quantity is 304. It's defaulted from what was in my PNA. The immediate replacement percent is 100%, and they have zero remaining useful life, which means I'm going to replace these refrigerators today. That completes my line item detail. I'm heading over to the sustainability data. I'm going down to my Energy Star refrigerators as my sustainability category. As stated before, my rate of electricity here in Maryland is 12.5 cents per kilowatt hour, so that's $0.125 per kilowatt hour. My traditional alternative came over from the PNA, and that means my original refrigerators were scheduled to be replaced at $746.99, and they had an EUL of 21. My usage per year was 675 kilowatt hours. My new refrigerators cost $900 times the 1.05 multiplier, had a life of 15 years, and they only use 435 kilowatt hours. With both the line item detail filled out and the sustainability data completed, I should be able to calculate a payback, and my incremental payback is 6.6 years. The incremental cost is $60,195.48. So I'm going to project those costs over 20 years, again, by choosing the 100% replacement cost immediately. I replace 304 refrigerators today, and again in year 15, which is my useful life. This data I'd like to insert into my cost projection, and item number 4641 should be down here in green. And here we are. So you can see the difference here. The sustainability item is in green. The balance of the P&A items are clear. Okay. I'd like to do the same for a marketability item. The process begins the same. I would go to the add line item, marketability, and add. I have two choices for adding a marketability item. I can add a new line item or add one to an existing item. Of course, I haven't created any, so I'm going to have to choose a new item. For this one, I'm going to choose to add closed circuit television for safety. So I'm going to actually add that to building exterior. I'm going to choose, let's see. I will choose, let's see, structure. Line item ID, I will call it 2500. My line item name would be CCTV for security. I'm going to give it a description that calls for a base system, 6 cameras, and a monitoring station. I'm going to have that as a lump sum project, so I'm going to call that each. My source, again, is an index. It'll be RS means. I'm going to call that section G 5020. My replacement cost is going to be $31,000, and that's, let's see, that's $6,000 for the base system, $4,000 per camera, and about $1,000 for the monitoring station. So I'll make that $31,000. My local multiplier is 1.05. Same index, RS means, same code for that, and my replacement EUL for that one, I will make 20 years. So that is the actual line item detail. I'm going to head over to the actual line item projection. My quantity, I just need one of those, one system. I would like to do that actually 100% replacement, and I'd like to do it today. But these could be any number. So replacement useful life is 0, and I'm going to project costs over 20 years, and that is $32,550. It happens today, and because of the 20-year useful life, it happens again in year 20. I insert that line item, and that line item will show up in my projection. And this is where the line item numbers are really helpful, as 2,500 in blue. So now in my projection, I've got my P&A items, I've got my marketability item in blue, and I've got my energy or sustainability item in green. Great, so now you can see both your sustainability and marketability item in the system. That concludes the coverage of all the steps needed to get sustainability marketability and ADA accessibility items into the system. Now I'll turn it back over to Bill and Bruce. Thank you.
Well, that concludes our training for today. I think I want to close with this one last thought for you. As Bruce talked about earlier in our conversation, we do have quite a bit of time before the first P&As have to be submitted to HUD. I would strongly encourage all housing authorities to get started in the process in terms of learning what the requirements are for the physical needs assessment, for the energy audit, download the GPNA software so you can begin learning how to operate it. Even if you're going to hire a contractor to do the GPNA for you, you need to know what's in there and you need to know what to expect of your contractor. The other types of things, as we mentioned during the course of the broadcast, you're going to have architectural takeoffs. That's going to take time. You're going to have to be able to develop the effective useful life of individual building components and things like this. All of that takes time. I would strongly encourage all of you to get started today, even though we have time, and for that reason, because we have time, to study it, to begin working on it, and to get yourself prepared so that when it comes time to do the submission, it will be a smooth transition for you. So that's my thought for today. Thank you very much for joining us.